Who added the WASM stuff?
No one adds anything to this list unless it's me these days. So the WASM group itself has like a subgroup of everything where they're talking about how they want to package their artifacts up into an OCI registry, and they want to try to get some kind of consistency between all the different groups who are doing this. And yeah, despite the fact that no one else typically throws anything on the agenda, feel free to throw stuff on the agenda. It's not just my own little spot there.
No, I was uh I I sometimes look
I,
and see what's going on. I saw the WASM stuff and yeah, there's some other conversations going on around it. So it seemed interesting, but I wasn't sure which folks like I don't know how many conversations around WASM stuff's going on for some of this because I feel like I get the like just the tail end of like many different conversations.
that was why I told him that I would bring this up to the group over here because I figured there's entirely possible some folks that would be interested in having an opinion that didn't know they were talking about it. Hey there, Phil.
Hi there. It's been a while for me,
It
I
has
think.
been a bit.
This is like the most popular time of my week. It's like, but I'm in Seattle, so it's actually morning, and it worked out.
I saw you on Brett's podcast. Was it last week or the week before? It's like he did
Oh
that
yeah,
instead of joined us.
yeah, that's true. That was again, yeah, that was exactly at this time slot last week. Um, yeah, I was gonna beg for a few minutes to announce something or like get ideas, but uh, we have a pretty small group so far.
It's usually a handful of people showing up here and there, and they trickle in bit by bit.
So you saying you came here for marketing purposes?
What? No. I'm here as an ambassador of the OCI. No, it's we finally worked with the LF on the kind of official schedule for the Container Plumbing Day Open Source Summit. I was going to say next month, but no, it's April. Um, so yeah, I don't know who's coming or how we'll do on attendance, but the day has currently has two 45-minute blocks. What I basically said, like we should add like OCI meeting time into the schedule. So they're not talks, they're not, it's just open time. So uh, unless they go on the schedule as like OCI meeting time, which sounds super boring, I was going to see if this group had ideas for like what to call them or like topics that we could like highlight that would be good. But my I'd be super interested to see if we could like somehow use it as, yeah, okay, so it is marketing, like expand our little circle because I feel like we've gotten fairly insular. Like I don't see a lot of, new people. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, the OCI is great. Like I'm glad we have the specs, but um, having it associated with an event that people will attend to go to other talks, like I'm hoping to entice them to like not just say, oh, I'm not part of the OCI, so why would I go to the meeting? Um, So
I,
yeah,
I think
the idea would, yeah.
I think the important question is there free alcohol at the social event?
um, hey, it's the LF. They usually have stuff like that. Amy, which she'll figure it out.
No comments. No, like in large part, I think so what's happened before as far as like every time that we set up like a meeting time, we tend to be able to actually like solve the agenda basically like within like a couple of weeks of it actually happening. So I think being able to put space rather than being able to say, hey, we need to be able to do like time directly, or like setting up it like things ahead of time doesn't seem to have worked well with this group, basically.
Yeah, true. So
You're not wrong, and that we can ask for new things, but generally in the past, I think it's been more like, yeah, we have space. We'll figure out what we're doing.
yeah.
But Bill, back to you.
So yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I think my idea was like, and I asked Jillian at the LF like how the room can be organized, but my master evil plan would be like have multiple tables, so it's not like a formal meeting of the OCI. It's more like, hey, there's tables with like a distribution topic or a rent, some we can come up with 2 or 3 topics and then again split it across 2 45-minute like slots, then people don't feel locked into a topic for an hour and a half. They're like, oh, okay, we talked about this. Now the next 45 I'll go see what this table like. I was even thinking there were all those OCI V2 docs like years ago. I assume there's a group of people who are like, hey, what's next, beyond kind of what we're working on today, OCI futures. Anyway, um, yeah,
How would
I've
the
talked enough.
how would the breakouts work for people that want to join your remote?
That is a good question. Um,
I'm gonna say something you're not gonna like. I don't think they
yeah,
will.
I don't think Container Plumbing Day got funding or whatever the cost is to like make it a virtual event or a hybrid. That's from what I understand. Yeah, the reality. Now, if someone at a table wants to start up Zoom on their laptop, hey, knock yourself out. You can you can have the OCI dial in. Uh, as sort of a manually done thing. So anyway, not to take up any more time, I'll add something to the notes or to the HackMD just with this kind of call for like if anyone has ideas, put them in the OCI Slack channel, send them on the dev list. But yeah, my general call is for like what can we name those sessions to make it potentially interesting for people to want to like hear what the OCI is up to. Yeah, I see your comment, Tianan. I gave my mea culpa about this slot being too popular on my calendar.
Excuses accepted for now.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anybody else have the ad hoc topics? I got a few on there that I put up, but I'm happy to talk about some of this ad hoc stuff if there's interesting things to chat about. All right. In that case, I'm going to throw a screen share up for this. 1 second. And then I got to make sure I keep all the chat because otherwise you guys have all the good comments in chat and I miss it. So get those windows moved off. All right. They are working over in WASM OCI land. They've got like a subgroup of a subgroup that is looking at how they want to package together the WASM artifacts on an OCI registry. And some of that during our chatter has been along things like, do we really need an artifact type? Are we good enough just having a unique config? And I kind of pushed them in directions of saying, hey, if you don't need it, don't turn it on just yet until you find a reason to start flipping some of these switches. So that was the little bit of guidance I gave them. But they started filling out what they want to put in their config media type. So their config media type is going to be their own media type. This is not the OCI media type. And so as they've been deciding what the schema is for their config, some of it they leverage what was already going on inside of OCI today. So they've got like the create of the OS, stuff like that. They've got some new stuff that's specific to them, talking about, hey, we got these components and other stuff along those lines. They might have some content in a config blob. They're not quite sure if they need anything in there or not. But the comment that I gave to them And it might be good that we've got folks like Tina and Derek here. You might not like it that I'm calling you both out on this one. But there are clients out there that are very dependent on the config digest being unique per image. And so they pull in that config ID as the ID of the image ID, even though most of us would think of it as the manifest digest and not look at the config digest specifically. So my question to the group is, does this config digest need to be unique for use cases out there? And if it doesn't, then they would like to just say, ditch this whole rootfs thing. They don't need it for the WASM. It doesn't apply to their scenario as well. rootfs looks wrong to them, so they get bothered by that. But if it is something that's useful for people, then they just like to know so that they know they need to include it. So I want to throw that out to the team here.
Config ID being an ID for identifying the image is codified in the image spec somewhere. I remember reading that.
That would be the OCI config ID though, right?
We actually report the config ID as the image ID when we on a cry-CTL or a kubelet image pool. We've been doing that for about 6 years, Brandon.
So what I'm hearing is cryo, containerd, Docker, and potentially the image spec itself all say this needs to be unique.
I think it's good that it's unique because yeah, there's a lot of places even in containerd where we pin that ID to represent like this is an instance of an image that's possibly separate from how it was distributed.
All good feedback, and I was thinking that could be the case, and was the reason that I started pinging them or the reason I interjected it, because originally that was in their completely ditch pile. They're like, we don't need this, we're ditching it. I said, before
It
you get
doesn't
rid of that,
have to be rootfs though. I mean, it's more the uniqueness of it. So if they don't have like a traditional rootfs, but I think it's good to have it be this config or represents like the full representation of a unique image. But whatever they put in it or however they do that, like the rootfs layers thing is not pretty.
Yeah, I think too, though, they should have a rootfs because WASI supports a rootfs. Like it wouldn't have the WASM components in it. Ideally,
It doesn't have to be diff IDs and layers though.
Yeah.
they're looking at this for how do you distribute the WASM binary itself. The binary runs in its own sandbox, and so they don't necessarily have a file system attached to it.
Well, they don't. Yeah. So they have a binary or components that are brought together into some execution context. That doesn't need to be in the rootfs, but they should still have a rootfs. Whether or not it's empty is dependent on the what's being done. But
yeah, and so Brian, the idea was that we don't want to encode that into the WASM stuff or into the OCI manifest, and it would be just a blank rootfs.
Always,
yeah.
What's under the components section there? Just what the unique elements are. Is there going to be a digest associated with like the components or like the ABI version or whatever the WASM terminology is there?
I think the closest you might get is there would be a digest for the individual WASM artifact itself that's passed as a layer. And this is what they were going to copy over for the rootfs, but the reason that it gets their attention is because this is not necessarily going to be part of a file system.
Yeah, so I was hearing some stuff about the design that there was going to be a difference between like the definition of the component interface, like the component interface would have a version and then there would be an implementation of it, and they might like they might be bound later on. That's kind of what I was wondering. Is there a case where you don't actually know when you're compiling these images what the actual implementation bits are going to be, but you only know the interface, or is that understood what I'm talking about there?
I think these are good questions for the WASM people, and I am not a good person to answer that.
Yeah, so I think you could potentially have something that is just an interface be exposed here, and then the actual implementation could also be represented as a different OCI artifact. And so there's a potential that the information in this component stuff could be reused across multiple implementations. So you have the imports and exports, and these are the things that you require, but the actual implementation might be different sets of binaries. And so this, if we don't have something unique in there, such as the rootfs or something different there, it's potential that the config that we have defined today so far wouldn't be unique across the entire artifact, if that makes sense.
Okay, it's in the components here. I see are those tagged components or just named? Like what does that represent in terms of like uniqueness?
Yes, so they would be versioned interfaces that are required for the WASI stuff. And so it's more for the runtime to be able to verify that what was passed in the layers does in fact meet this particular specification that is here. And it also gives you the ability, that gives the runtime the ability to say, hey, I actually don't support that particular set of exports that you are saying that you need, so I can't run you.
Okay. I think I have more questions, but yeah, maybe it's another topic.
They meet bi-weekly, and so if you want to join in and have discussions with them, I can send you over the calendar info.
I'll just say like kind of high level in terms of uniqueness. I think it's good to have uniqueness in terms of how that uniqueness comes, whether it comes from rootfs, from layers, or from just like hashes of the components. I think that's doesn't matter too much. I think for us on the runtime side, we want something that represents something that's the actual runnable bits that we're actually going to pass to the runtime, or that we can use to verify the content, that we got the right content, that it's the content that's expected for this image before we actually run it. But in terms of like how that is, yeah, I know it's a little fuzzy here because there's just newer ideas, and the FS isn't as important.
Is that requirement for uniqueness specific to container runtimes? The reason I ask is because we do have the empty JSON descriptor that is used for a config object for artifacts that don't ship with a config itself. We've also got Helm charts that today don't identify their layers. They just specify a version number. And if all your version numbers happens to be the same, you might push two completely different Helm charts with the same config as well.
I mean, I'm only talking about from the runtime perspective because like the config we use as an identifier that represents like this checked out, or like this prepared, here's something that's been prepared locally and is ready to run, kind of separate from like the distribution part. So like the manifest digest is great for like verifying that the content you got is correct. But then sometimes we'll switch over to the config ID, or there's places where the config ID is used to represent like, okay, here's an instance of it that has been prepared on disk and is ready to go. could we use the manifests? We probably could in a lot of cases. So some of it might be just historical, because yeah, historically, yeah, GZIP threw a wrench into the uniqueness, but that might not matter here. We could probably move away from some of those, but I'm just talking about where we're at today. And if we have that uniqueness at the manifest level, maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm scanning through the spec to see if I can find, because I recall the comment. I recall the string somewhere in there that it's used by people to digest that. So I wanted to
There's a link in
make
chat.
sure we won't break things. You threw it in the chat?
Yeah, config.md image ID. We define the image ID concept as the digest of the config.
So given that, I think they're okay here spec wise because they're not defining the config MD. The config MD is the OCI schema. So spec wise, I think they're okay. In practicality and in the higher level runtime thing, I think it's a good idea for them to try to be unique. But thanks for that, Tianon. All right. I think I've got what I need to take back to them. Anybody else have thoughts on this before I jump to the next topic? Tianon, since you're here, I threw you on the next topic. Also just because I thought it was interesting in general, which was that we're talking about adding more platforms out there, more platform variants. And so AMD 64, V1, V2, V3, where the V1 is silent. And similar for, I guess, RISC. It's apparently going to do some similar stuff. So for me, I know I've got some code on my side that I'm going to need to start updating to support all this. And I just figured it was a change that I think is going to be bigger and wider reaching than some of us may think when we're just looking at this PR.
So I had a question about this. Is what's the right way to say it? Is currently, the variant resolution is happening in the runtimes. I know Containerd has code for the ARM, variant parsing. Who else does? Is it just Docker? Is there any other? Well, I guess Podman, obviously, and Creo do have their own resolution somewhere. Like, I guess this is the spec side. Like, is there a broader discussion we need to have about commonality and making sure that we all assess the same things the same way?
That's kind of what I was thinking. I was doing a little bit of looking through the Containerd code itself to update some of my own code. And some of it I'm looking and thinking, do we need to codify that variants can go in a certain direction? The compatibility from, V2, AMD 64 V2 can interpret an AMD 64 V1 image. And so you can go backwards, but you can't go forward. I think there are things like that we might want to consider. But in terms of implementation, I know Containerd has the big one, but I don't think it's far from the only one.
I think this is going to get more important as more distributions start to play with, for example, newer ARM variant, AMD 64 variants. Sorry, because some of them are looking at either updating their baselines or supporting more baselines. I think Arch
gonna-
was the latest one that decided to look at updating to V3 or something. I can't remember.
And they're not all simple numbers, are they?
No, they're not. For AMD 64, the community around that ISA managed to retcon simple numbers that are like a collection of the million features that x86 has had, like SSE and all that. And they managed to retcon it into 4 buckets of different variants. ARM has always had numbers, but they are actually more nuanced than the numbers that we have in the spec, especially highlighted by Go finally adding Go ARM 64, and they're not supporting a bare V8. They're only supporting the specific minor versions, and the mapping between minor versions there is extremely complex. Like I think V8.4 or 8.5 is equivalent to or compatible with V9.0 or something like that, which is complicated. And
Let me
this,
ask another leading question in this. I
gonna ask-
understand if I know that I've got, if I'm looking for a specific platform, you pass me a string and says, give me the AMD 64 V2, and I see someone's got a V0 or like V1 or V2, and I pick whichever one makes the most sense for me. How do I know that I'm on an AMD 64 V2 system?
there's some code that Tonus has in a repo that you can run that will tell you. Or you can cat proc CPU info and parse the flags yourself to figure out which bucket you're in.
I was afraid you're going to say something along those lines.
Doesn't the dynamic linker actually provide that information, or is that only for x86 64 where it's able to? Because I know the GCC added this entire layer to dynamically choose different shared objects based on sub-architectures, but I don't know if that work extended to ARM, I guess.
Well, we're not just talking about ARM. We're also talking about x86 and power and RISC.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is like, so I said GCC, but I meant glibc. Does the glibc like dynamic library selection mechanism, architecture dependent selection mechanism, is that generic or is that x86 64 only? Is that actually something you could build on top of?
I don't know, but it's user space. So you'd be asking glibc which architecture it was compiled for, not which architecture the kernel it's running on supports.
No,
Or the hardware it's running on
detection.
supports.
It's runtime detection.
So that might be doable, yeah.
I will do some.
Really, what we've specified in the spec is an object that defines the minimum level of compatibility of the image, which got kind of abused with OS version, because with Windows OS versions, it defines the version of the OS of the image, not actually the minimum version required to run it, which is a little different, but similar enough that you can kind of squint and munge the OS version and make it work.
Looks like Steve-O has a question.
Hey, I remember when we did this, we didn't find any magic in the compiler infrastructure, so that's why we didn't adopt that. The other piece is like, so the Windows is kind of interesting because so I think the one magic of the Linux containers is that the ABI that you really need is just the kernel, and that's stable. And so what ends up happening is you end up trying to represent some of the ABI in the CPU architecture and then some of the ABI in like the platform kernel requirements. And I think that's where this gets a little difficult. I don't know if these, oh yeah, so for example, like TP64LE, like the LE part is really baking. There's some like calling differences. Somebody correct me if I'm totally wrong on this, but there's like some calling conventions that are difference between this. Thanks, Bjorn. You can say ABI as ABI. Oh, yeah, I've always said it ABI. Is it ABI? All right. That's on recording. Great. All right. So, the I think the variant we kind of had in place for this. I don't know what we had on the the Abby side though, like of saying like, hey, I have this kernel with this version of Win32 or however they, because like Windows, they don't have a stable kernel API, but they have a stable like Win32. I think it's called the Win32 API, Abby, and so it would be good. I don't know if we need to divide between those concepts or not, though. I think that's where I would. Anyways, that's some history and some kind of thoughts of why this is the way this is.
Yeah, I'm imagining the detection code for this is going to get very scattered, especially because not all runtimes are Go based. You've got a couple of them that are Rust and C and other things. So the detection will be interesting.
I mean, you know, there are I'm not saying it's a good idea or anything. There are workarounds to that. You could always have a little bit of Go code that's embedded in your process image, and you know drop into a tempfs and run. I mean, you know, not saying you should do that, but
I mean, even the Go code is catting the proc CPU info and parsing that and then doing some crazy map lookup of all kinds of values. It's convoluted from what I've been seeing. There's no simple you cat this thing and you see your CPU has V2 because that's just not a thing that AMD 64 really did from their side.
Yeah, the variants on AMD 64 were a retcon.
The other reason this gets even more complicated is that the proposals for the image compatibility working group, the simple one that I was putting out there was to add an extra annotation support so that Containerd could be told, sure, you prefer AMD 64, but if you see this annotation, you prefer that even more. And so all that platform ordering logic of figuring out which one you want to do would need an extra hint in there that says, okay, here's your annotations that you like because you happen to support this NVIDIA GPU on your machine and you can run those container images. So something else come down the pipeline to consider. And if you have thoughts and concerns on that, we meet weekly on Mondays. And this is just the simple proposal. We get a lot different from this in the other versions. I ask if everybody more meetings you don't want to attend. All right. On that stunned silence, I think we're out of official agenda items. I can throw an unofficial one because we've got a bunch of people here that are on the distribution spec. I had thrown out there for nominating ROM on the distribution spec, and Derek, you threw the comment out there, and so I figure it's good a time as any to chat about it. What is the conditions and criteria for adding additional maintainers?
I don't really want to discuss that here, though. I think we can discuss that offline, but yeah, I don't think now's a good time to do that. I think we have a lot of other stuff we should worry about.
All right. Any other topics? We got a lot of people here.
Where's the calendar invite for this meeting? I have to like beg, borrow, steal from everybody.
You mean the
like
meeting that
the,
you're currently in?
I know. Well, I beg, borrow, stealed.
Okay,
And
got No, that's fine. I
Yeah,
was just like, I can't, I'm not sure if I'm actually hearing this right. Somebody's dropped it over in chat for you. But
Yeah,
it
I
is on the
share- I
OCI
shared-
calendar.
It's a public calendar. There's no like invite people get added to. It's just a public calendar feed that you can see the event on.
And we've got our own HackMD that is also linked in our HackMD, but I put that direct HackMD link in there. And at the top of that, it includes all the same details. And we meet Mondays, same bat time, same bat channel, but on Mondays.
Wait, is the WASM thing you're talking about? That's not an OCI
The WASM
working
thing is
group?
not.
What is
that.
the parent of that?
That is a CNCF working group.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I know there's like a
Uh,
Bike Code Alliance. I don't know what is that under?
Bytecode Alliance. So Bytecode Alliance is a separate organization that's maybe the OCI one, like with like the would be. Okay, it's the OCI equivalent of the WASM world, but then the WASM working
Tag.
group is the like.
That's under
Oh, is it
tag
tag
runtime.
WASM?
Yeah, it's under
Yes.
tag runtime and tag observability.
Tag.
They've created a working group, and
Yeah, there
I'm
we
looking
go.
for the
Yeah.
channel.
So Tag Runtime has their meetings on Tuesday, 11 Eastern. They do it every other week. And so next week is the Tag Runtime meeting. And so Tag Runtime WASM working group. So this is the working group under Tag Runtime. Then the alternate weeks, and so 2 weeks from now, is the OCI discussion within that WASM working group. So they're alternating the weeks. 1 week is the overall WASM working group, and the alternate weeks are the runtime or the OCI.
I've just posted a link over to like the CNCF calendar that's actually searchable versus the one that isn't. And this may be helpful to you.
Yeah, I have like the whole OC or the whole CNCF calendar.
There's a
that
lot.
I usually don't have turned on, but it's like
I wouldn't know.
what in there. It's madness.
Yeah. Welcome to my life. Thank you. Yes.
Amy doesn't feel offended
Yeah,
at all
and-
by that comment.
And yeah, Derek, like feel free to bug me offline. I have all of those invites, and I've been working with a fair few. I mean, you were on a call with me about this a couple days ago, so let me know if you need help finding it.
Yeah, I just don't want to show up to the wrong group or something.
On the 12th, I think it is labeled as CNCF WASM working group.
Okay, yeah, I see that one. I just also saw the CNCF one and then the tag runtime
Yes.
WASM one.
So the-
Okay.
Yes. And then there's a
the-
confusion between a WASM Edge group as well. It's very exciting. Yes.
Is it
However,
not
we're
pronounced
happy to help.
Is it
the
not pronounced
tag-
WASM? No, I'm just kidding.
Steven's trolling. He's trolling.
So the tag WASM is the or the tag runtime WASM working group. That is the normal WASM working group. The one that's
Yes.
about the OCI formats is the CNCF WASM working group. They're really confusingly named because they both sound like just the one where we talk about WASM, not the one where we talk about like WASM interoperability and distribution.
Okay, so I'm not the only one who had this question then.
Yes.
So
Naming
Okay,
things
great.
is in fact still hard.
do we have is there any effort to like have like a LF open source calendar with all this stuff on it? Because that would be really helpful.
You mean, like,
No, I think you would be
OCI and
overwhelmed very
related-
quickly.
Yeah, there's quite a bit, but it'd be good to see.
Talkify is really like the best one that I've got, and then we've linked over to the OCI calendar as well. And OCI is in fact still separate from CNCF, even though I'm wearing both hats right now.
I don't see a hat.
Hold on, it's around here somewhere. No, the red hat is actually over in the back corner, but you know, I don't wear that hat. See, like I knew you could help. See, wonderful. Like you have like the new style too. Ooh. That was not my time there. Yeah.
that one's fresh from reInvent actually.
Ah, okay. I was gonna say I haven't actually like worn the actual red hat for 5 years, so you know. Merry Adventures, any other questions that I can help answer or at least make slightly less clear? because that seems to be like where things are going today. Is this still valid? Open meetings. Probably not. Yeah, because we haven't.
That's what I'm still using. I've been using that for the years now. So, and
I mean, no, like
you guys-
like you are great in that. Like that is actually still accurate. It is, however, outdated in that there are more meetings that we have
It's just-
added.
Okay, yeah. I got to get a little bit up to speed on that. I've always
No, you're doing
worked in
great.
the background and take when I can with you guys. So, okay, I'll take a look then and try to update some of these with my calendar too, then accordingly. And
Yes,
from
like
there.
the open meetings part isn't. It's still accurate. There's just other meetings for like the Monday meeting, and a Tuesday meeting. So.
Bjorn, I think I saw you at reInvent this past November. If you were there, I'm pretty sure from a distance, but
I was.
yeah. Okay, cool. I thought so, but this past year's was crazy again. It was like 2018 level, so it was nuts.
I will be at Open Source Summit and Container Plumbing Days for what that's worth. So
yeah, I'll let you guys know if I can make any of these too. I tried to, so.
Dropped a link in there that it's from however I have it added in Google. It said, hey, here's the public URL. So that might work for people in the chat.
that matches what I have.
All right, we're out of agenda items. We got all the good people here. Any last topics for the day? Otherwise, I can multiply 15 times, what do we have, 12 people? That's a lot of our man hours back, person hours back.
Always good to see all of you. Get back to work. There.
Sold. All right. Have a great one, everybody.
Bye, everyone.